Our next game of the weekend features our own vested interest. It is Ireland v Scotland.
What? Ireland aren't playing, are they?
Yeah.
Oh. Are you sure?
Yeah. You're going to be treated to some lovely Irish footy.
You know, my mother told me never to. If I don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I think I don't think we need to preview this one.
You can talk Scotland, man.
Yeah.
It's going to be on Saturday the 5th of December as well. The 2:15 kickoff at the Aviva Stadium, reffed by Matthew Carley of the RFU. Weather conditions, probably no surprise to either teams. It's meant to be around 8 degrees, chilly, bits of rain, like shower and patchy sun. It's just a chilly December day, which is to be honest, between both these teams, Ireland and Scotland, no surprises to anyone. It's actually pretty tepid out here, so it's perfect conditions for winter rugby, which both sides are used to. Obviously, this is the third place playoff, I guess. Third and fourth place teams. Both of them would be slightly disappointed to find themselves here, but probably not wholly surprised if they're being honest with themselves. But some silverware on the line in the second fixture of the Saturday afternoon.
Silverware? You get a bronze medal in it?
Yeah. Bronzeware.
Okay, yeah. You do find it hard. I mean, we spoke about Ireland earlier. I mean, I'm joking in well, I don't know if I'm joking.
Yeah.
When I say I don't want to talk about Ireland that much, I mean, it's been, from an Ireland fan point of view, it's obviously
very disheartening. Deflating.
Yeah, it's just sad, when the team has basically been just on a downward spiral for 2 years and it doesn't look to be improving at all. And it is gut wrenching. At times, these are the moments when Ireland pull out a performance, but certainly on the evidence of what we've seen so far, out of sorts. A decent performance against a poor Welsh team in terms of when they can get on top of teams physically. They're pretty good at seeing them off, and when they are better than their opposition, they're pretty good at limiting their opposition opportunities and winning games.
When you were looking back in the aughts of an Ireland team, you saw a team that was all razzle-dazzle with a load of talent that used to win big games against teams they really shouldn't have beaten, and away from home in Twickenham pulling out big wins, and then would inexplicably lose the week after to a team they're probably better than. So we've reached a level of consistency and development where we actually do beat the teams we're better than when we can beat them up. But by God, we have done so with very little invention, and we're just kind of square peg round hole, pang, pang, pang. A lot of the way
we get relentlessly negative when we talk about Ireland. It's not my go-to when I'm talking about rugby at all to be negative.
No.
I think that most teams are positive, most teams are beautiful to watch, but from an Ireland point of view, it's been very bludgeoning. It's been
also from a rugby point of view.
No, it's been very.
It feels like we're the bad guys.
Yeah, it does. We play very silly rugby and sometimes get away with it because we're so physical.
Yeah.
The intelligence of the group seems to be gone. Maybe they'll be egg on my face and they'll pull out a result. A result does feel pretty necessary in terms of the complaints about the team are arriving at boiling point in terms of our own media. It's like the Welsh were the first to get really on the backs of Pivac, and while nobody's quite on the back of Farrell, I think people are just on the back of the team generally and saying this hasn't been close to good enough. It gets worse every week. The team are ugly and bludgeoning and losing a lot of the time and unconvincing in just about every showing. It's hard to imagine the Andy Farrell's not going anywhere until his contract runs out. There's no
precedent for
there's
them
no way
there's
no way they do it in this time either. Buy someone out of their contract. There's just no way. So his contract runs through to the end of next year after the Lions tour. So he's going to have a Six Nations anyway. But even so, it feels like a loss here could be something that would be too difficult to recover from. Some of the talk out of him in after the match saying I think his quote was we lacked the courage of our convictions.
Yes.
Which was an interesting.
When you couple that with how proud he was of the boys after the England showing, and you're like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, no, it doesn't really make sense. But I feel like looking at the team in that second half where they were kind of hands on hips, heads down, not really talking, not playing with much initiative or much intent or much direction, that a defeat here would be a real nail in the coffin, and it would be hard to imagine them recovering from that. Conversely, though, if they were to come out and end the season with a good win, with a third place in this tournament, if they were to beat Scotland, as they often have in times gone by, even this struggling narrative, the struggling narrative has often been stopgapped with convincing wins over Scotland as they continue to spiral downward. It's like down, down, down. Beat Scotland really well, down, down, down. Yeah. Beat Scotland really well again.
It happens a lot.
Yeah, so
probably too much to the chagrin of Scotland themselves, because their spiral isn't downward at all. They've kind of been on their graph is kind of going like this.
Ireland.
Yeah. Up, inexplicably poor showing against the Irish, and then we're back up again, and we're tearing England apart next week, and you're like, what's going on here, Scotland?
Yeah. So it's been a good matchup for Ireland, and it could be a performance that could re-energise a side sorely lacking in energy. And galvanise them potentially to play with, if not flair, a little bit more just tempo and aggression.
Absolute belief in what they're doing. Yeah, no, there seems to be very little of that. But just in terms of a broad preview as well.
No, well, sorry to interrupt you. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, from Scotland's point of view, that actually, compared to when you were talking about Pivac and now Farrell, no one's really on the back of Gregor, even though last year, like when you're looking this time last year, it was just in the aftermath of a disastrous World Cup campaign, and there were causes for concern, there were calls for him to go, and he really has responded, and the team have responded really well.
After he fell out with Finn Russell, I just thought that's it.
Done.
And we had been making this comparison between his Scotland and Eddie O'Sullivan's Ireland, because they felt so similar. They were playing lovely attacking rugby. They were
falling just short.
Yeah, falling short consistently and lacking a little bit in terms of nous of the top level teams
and physicality sometimes as well. Yeah,
and then after the horror show of a World Cup where they lost to Japan and got stuffed by Ireland and were out in the group, I was like, oh, it's exactly the same. And then Eddie O'Sullivan lingered on as a walking dead man for one more Six Nations before they axed him.
Yeah,
and it looked exactly the same. Like that was going to happen to a T.
Yeah, but
then all of a sudden, after Finn Russell falls out, they find something, and what they find is a really, really brilliant pack, and they put something together. They add like Rory Sutherland, who might have been a missing element. Then you have a guy like Xander Fagerson stepping it up on a couple of levels, really.
Ollie Keble, Nell, Jamie Ritchie behind him. Jamie Ritchie, brilliant.
Stepped up massively this year, and then all of a sudden, the game against Ireland, they were toe to toe with our pack, and but for a Hoggy drop ball, there was nothing to separate the teams.
Should have been a draw, really. That game.
Likewise, the game against England, they did end up losing it by 10 points, but it was a very, very tight affair. It was in hard conditions in Murrayfield, and again against the English pack, they were level. They were by no means dominated. Without Finn Russell, as has been the case for frustratingly pretty much the whole year.
Yes.
Finn just came to town to play Georgia, and that was about it.
Yep.
But they've lacked that ability to cut loose and to find tries they need, and that's been a consistent theme. But for that one Stuart Hogg error off an English kick, it was going to be like 6-3 or something like that to England. So it was an extremely tight game where they didn't give an inch in the forward pack up front. And even likewise last time out against France, which was obviously a disappointing result for them, there's a consistent theme. But for a Stuart Hogg error, they could have been in a position to draw that game, despite France sort of edging the contest in large parts. So they're very close. We find ourselves going in circles and saying this a little bit about Scotland, but to see like they have been a team with attacking flair, and this season they've gone back to the nuts and bolts and found themselves with a pack that is as tough as anyone in Europe. And that's got to be an area of excitement
pack with depth off the bench. What they have done is they've gone a bit more rudimentary with obviously 2 10s down. They haven't been moving the pill as well, despite having some really informed backs. They haven't been able to get them in space, so it's not quite married yet. But then the other thing,
feel like if they could just put it together.
Well, this should be the game they should be targeting. It's their last game of the season, last game of the year, last game of a very successful year, 5 in a row, nearly 6, but not quite. But just in terms of etching, we were talking about France in terms of the colour of the game. We were talking about France a few weeks ago in terms of they hadn't beaten Ireland at home in ages. They needed to remedy that. They did. They wanted to go out against Fiji to get that win back. Didn't manage it because of COVID. But their only loss of the season came in Murrayfield. They wanted to get that back. They did at Scots' expense. As far as Scotland are concerned, in terms of grudges, they really owe Ireland some pain, because between Pro 14 tonkings and the fact that their side has consistently failed to do it against the men in green, and be that the World Cup they were soundly beaten, and it just
They haven't really managed to lay a glove. I mean, the game in 2018 that they ended up losing decisively involved like 3 butchered tries.
It was,
They've been so inexplicably unable to convert chances against us that it feels like we've used up all our 9 lives against them. And this season they've well, not this season, they didn't beat England, but they have beaten England once and drawn with them in Twickenham. They've beaten Wales this year in Cardiff for the first time. They beat France at home in a statement win. To this date, France is still the only France defeat that they've had all year. Very impressive performances across the board. They've had wins against Australia, but I think they've beaten us once in the last 9 outings dating back to 2013. They had 1 win in 2017, but outside of that it's just been non-stop losses, and that feels, for 2 sides as evenly matched as these two, you might think it feels very strange that the record is so unbalanced, and they'll definitely be eyeing this. I think one of the things that's encouraged me from a Scottish point of view, I remember before the Ireland game at the World Cup, Stuart Hogg was coming out and saying, like, make no mistake, our goal here is to win the World Cup. And it was like they hadn't had a good pre-season, they hadn't looked especially good all year, apart from that 1 game against England. And so to have Hoggy coming in and saying that and being bullish, I was wondering, like, do you even believe what you're saying? And it's not a colour that suits the Scots, being braggadocious. Whereas this week, I haven't heard so much as a peep out of the Scottish camp. And that actually is something that
speaks
might make
more to focus.
Might make me like that. I'd say internally they're really eyeballing this. Especially after the defeat to France. They're like, arg, we were doing so well. Let's get the Irish. Let's get them in
the
Dublin.
Irish are rubbish this
year.
Let's
get them. I'd say that their major focus
should be for sure. But we'll just pivot on just to do a brief review or preview from both sides' points of view in terms of the game itself. Starting with the hosts, and that is ourselves, Ireland. And just, I suppose we're kind of going looping around again. The quality of rugby we've seen from Ireland this year has been pretty poor. Pretty especially poor on the offence. Like their defence at times has been very good. That they obviously switched off for that try. There have been some disconnect in their defence, but the defence can't do it all. It's the main gripe is their offence has been struggling to get anything.
100%. That is problem 1, 2, and 3 as far as I'm concerned. Apart from maybe the focus and drive of the team in terms of attitude and galvanising that. I mean, in terms of squads, I guess, to start us off, there's been some troubling news. I think Ed Byrne, a loosehead as we suspected, not going to be involved. Will Connors out injured. He's been an informed 7. James Lowe not going to be involved. And Billy Burns, who made his first start last week, not going to be involved. However, there is the return potentially of Sexton and Henshaw. They are back to full training.
That's good to hear.
Interesting that Eric O'Sullivan is the only other loosehead. Now, the Finlay-Bealham experiment didn't work at all. But the language they used about Eric O'Sullivan was that he's just training with the squad, as was Harry Byrne. So he's not in the squad. They're training with the squad this week.
Which leads me to believe they're not an option.
It leads me to believe they're not going to go with it, which means that they're going to go with either Bealham or Porter as a loosehead, which feels
fundamentally silly, given that there are good scrummagers all over the provinces who could fill that jersey at loosehead. The
potential danger that's in there against the Scottish
That's
scrum.
True too.
But they have decisions to make.
Well, the more sensible of if you're going with a Porter or a Bealham at loosehead, go with Porter and bring John Ryan, who is a very good tight head, who actually monstered a few scrums in his few test minutes that he's had for reasons unknown. Get a Munster prop is a far more fearful prospect than a Connacht prop.
Well, John Ryan is a hidden gem for Ireland.
He's
a spectacular scrummager. He's very, very technical in everything he does. He's a really, really excellent player, and it's good to see him in the squad getting his chance. And I suspect he will be in there somewhere this week. But it's going to. I doubt they're going to deviate from the Finlay-Bealham dynamic. They're going to start Keane, I'd say, and bring Bealham off the bench. With John Ryan coming off the bench on the other side and Porter starting. Elsewhere, it's not so certain, and we don't have the squads, so that's going to be limiting in terms of talking about them. I'm sure you'll all have them by the time this video is out.
We're shooting it on Wednesday,
which is one of the things that goes on in rugby world. You can only shoot once a week. What are you going to do? So they have massive decisions to make in terms of like the back row. I don't know if they're going to go with Josh or bring him in or not.
I think Byrne was probably out again. I think he did provide a good line out option, which was useful, but he also Ty Byrne, but he also switched off on the. He was at fault for the try. He's not
physical enough to play against Scotland. No disrespect, but I think it's a question of whether they go with O'Mahony, Stander, and Doris, or
Josh
Stander and
Daragh.
Yeah, obviously with Josh at 7 in there.
Because one thing that we learned from the England thing is O'Mahony, Stander and Daragh doesn't really work as far as pace. I think we were sorely lacking for speed on the defensive line.
We were always lacking for speed though, aren't we?
No, but one thing's, without the ball, between either Will Connors or Josh van der Fleers, that style of 7 is he sets the defensive line's tempo.
Yeah.
And without him there was none of that.
Yeah.
So I think one of them has to play, and if Connors is unavailable, I think it will be Josh.
One would think, from a defensive point of view, as you say, to adopt that mould so they don't have to change their system.
And pressure, they have a guy like they're up against Scotland with their third choice 10 there. You want a pacey 7 to pressure that ball, to be honest,
no
all
question.
day.
Speaking of speed, they'll have a decision to make between Murray and Gibson Park. Murray's kind of been wayward in terms of form, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them go back to him. Sexton and Henshaw could come straight in.
That would improve them on what they saw last week, for sure. Sexton's still quality, but
and then the back three as well. Without James Lowe, we would suspect Conway will come back in, and the question is whether Stockdale will make way, or whether Earls will make way, or whether Keenan will make way. It remains to be seen. But beyond the squads, in terms of what Ireland need to do, like we constantly speak about how as a team they need to evolve their game and attack. Let's be honest, they're not going to do that. They're not going to change what has been a 2-year trend in a week.
Yeah, probably not.
That there's just they're not going to rock up on the last week of the season and all of a sudden start flinging the ball around to the wings and scoring pretty tries. No way.
Yeah.
This game against Scotland, against this monstrous Scottish pack, is going to be about a battle.
Yeah.
And what Ireland need to do to win this game is win that battle. And like last week and times against England, they weren't really as up for the fight as one would expect an Irish team to be.
Yeah.
And now this week is really, it's a time to respond. It's a time for the team to lay down a marker and say, listen, we're not going to throw this guy Farrell under the bus. He's going to be with us one way or another. We need to perform, and that involves just simple things like running on both attack and defence as the forwards, like running into the contact and through the contact, and on defence second shoves through the contact. I mean, too often everything Ireland are doing is static, and that's just down to the quality of the individual play from the individual player. Why aren't you running onto the ball? Why aren't you sprinting into contact? One of the guys who's doing it is CJ Stander, but not enough of the other guys are doing it. And I think in terms of supporting each other and winning those tight carries, like that's going to be everything. Winning the forward battle is going to be everything. And if they do that, as we've seen in times gone by against Scotland, they can then suck them in, and then even towards the end of games they end up scoring some decent tries.
Yeah.
But it's about winning that battle.
Coming to the pitch of the battle that's going to be put in front of them. Like Scotland will be eyeballing it. They owe us pain, as we were saying. So we need to match it and exceed that. We need to surprise them with how up for the game we are, because it's the last game of the season, and neither side wants to go away losing, because it's a long few months to have that as a hangover. Like it's much better to win your last game of the season rather than to lose it. So that'll be a huge focus. You'd hope that things like motivation for that, and if guys like Johnny Sexton are coming back in, you'd hope that will be remedied very quickly.
Sexton would be massive. I think James Ryan coming in as captain, it
didn't help that he got fundamentally outplayed.
It came at the wrong time. That's just going to say it came at the wrong time, because he had just been utterly outworked by Maro Itoje and beaten at every play, and then he had to come out and repeat the Andy Farrell line that everything was super positive and that the gap against England was narrowing, where we all kind of know
that's not
in
true.
His own head
he knows that's not
he would have known in his own head how badly he got outplayed by Itoje.
Yes.
And for a guy he's
played Itoje a few times in blue and green, he knows the difference. He's got some plays off in blue and green before, and he didn't on that game. So it's like,
but I'd say that would have been weighing on his head. So having Sexton, I'd say Ryan has probably been in his own head, and he didn't play well last week.
No, he didn't. He looked kind of nowhere. He looked like a guy shorn of confidence is what he did, whereas the likes of Henderson came back in and with a point to prove and looked more bullish. He looked a little bit at sea. So
Henderson's a guy who needs to step up as a leader as well, and I don't know if they'll go for a Mahoney or what, but the leadership group and Sexton need to bring this team together and get them all on the same page in terms of just committing to each play and committing to supporting one another, because that was a huge missing element against Georgia. Just working on winning them each moment as it comes, and believing in yourselves, just from a body language point of view. What we want to see from Ireland is, what would he say, shoulders back, chest out, all focused on the job in front of you, all running, just basic things like that have been missing from the team that need to return. Like without resorting to cliche, a bit of passion for your country, etc. etc.
Yeah.
That would not go amiss, and that's something that has been missing.
It would fix a lot of the static element to the offense. Like there are deeper issues, but like certainly against England in the second half, especially, and then the second half against Georgia, just the static nature of the forwards going to carry, that is on that. And then in the breaks in play, where are the teams huddling? Like, you need to be keen to it. Like, if there's a break in play, I want to see the backs in conference. I want to see Johnny barking orders. I want to see direction. Because the other thing is that, like, coming out of the old Joe Schmidt era, where the play was so prescribed and the team are so drilled and so process driven, it feels like there's a hangover of that, where they're still kind of conditioned to think that way, but they don't have quite the same confidence in this coaching like, certainly, like with Joe Schmidt there was certainly a sense, particularly from the Leinster guys, and you hear Brian O'Driscoll talk about it, like there was the notion that Joe Schmidt is so detail focused that if we just do this and this really accurately and at speed, then a try will be scored here by this man. And then more often than not, when against better teams especially, that happened. That repeatedly happened, and they scored the tries, and that's where the confidence came from. Whereas it feels like with Farrell, there's no clarity. And the guys are doing their first phase hit up, second phase hit up, and then it's like, what do I do now? Normally I'm used to knowing where I'm going or what to do, and now I'm not. And couple that with the fact that, as you say, they're not going to come out in the last game of the season and suddenly start throwing the ball around spectacularly. So just a bit more focus and a bit more drive and commitment to whatever decision you do make. So don't be ponderous, going like, I don't quite know what I'm going to do. I'm going to think about, what do I think I'm going to do? Because there's no time to think about it. Just do it.
Everything you do it with purpose and intent. Absolutely. And one hopes that Sexton will bring a little bit of that,
and more direction,
back to the team.
Sure, more speed.
But
as well as more quality.
One of the things we can't deny, like as we romanticize about Ireland doing good things on offense, there's going to be a lot of kicking in this game.
There will. That's ultimately where it's going to be decided.
There's been a lot of kicking in every game, and the quality of kicking from whoever's selected at 9 and preferably Sexton.
And couple that with the comfort both of these teams, Scotland as well, feel when they don't have the ball. They're both good defenders as teams, which just all equates to a kicking or a kick heavy game.
But can Ireland and can Sexton really trouble Stewie Hogg? I mean, Hogg has been
suspect under attacking, probing kicks in the backfield. That's when he's looked his worst.
Been working. The grubbers in behind. Like Ireland were painfully inaccurate against Georgia in terms of so many kicks went dead. So many of them were loose. So many of them
wrong options.
Markable. All of that jazz. Sexton's got to bring. He's got to take control of the kicking game and put it in behind and put Hoggy under pressure. Hogg has been, he can He's got. You could argue he's got direct responsibility for 3 defeats this year.
I would caveat the last one. That's fair. Very, very hard.
Well, you could. He cost them an opportunity to get a draw.
Yes, he did.
With a really basic error, and then he dropped a ball over the line against Ireland, and then he made an absolute hames of a kick in the backfield against England, which cost them there. So
he looks when he's retreating to gather a ball that's heading towards his own line. That's when he looks his most shaky and least confident as a player.
So from an Ireland point of view, putting him under pressure, putting the Scots under pressure constantly with probing kicks is going to be vital. And mixing up that kicking game. It doesn't just need to be a bomb in the sky. It's fine to work those in if the plan is there and the kick chase is excellent. But by and large, trusting Sexton to find grass and put Hogg under pressure is a key to their kicking game. Defensively speaking, when Scotland have the ball, there's a couple. Obviously, the equation is much the same in terms of not allowing the Hamish Watsons, the Jamie Ritchies to dominate you and get on top of you. But there does have to be a concern as well. Like, you see some footage from Scotland in training, they haven't forgot their run game. They're just not as sharp at executing it. So they do have to be aware and mindful of the danger that Scotland have out wide. And the 2 centres who are selected, whoever they may be, need to shoot up and put Weir under pressure. Make him make decisions. Make him, like, if you want to get out wide here, you're going to have to throw a pass you're not 100% comfortable with. And then you have like a Josh van der Fleer or a CJ Stander on the inside making tackles, forcing him on the inside and making good defensive reads with good line speed from the midfield.
If the defence is starting to get on top, you'll see Duncan Weir disappear will be the first thing, and then Ali Price will start really annoying you as the second thing, because you'll be very slow and stuff. If all roads lead through Ali Price for Scotland, then their attack does kind of disintegrate fairly quickly a lot of the time. So that's going to be the incremental plan for Ireland on defence to try and do it. It stems from the kicking game as well as putting Hoggy under pressure with those kicks. That by osmosis or by kind of relation, it puts the halfbacks under pressure to respond. So if Sexton and Murray or whoever is at the halfback can edge that kicking game and impose themselves physically, then that's kind of what they want to do, shake the Scottish halfbacks.
Listen, before we move on to discuss Scotland, I just want to talk about the scrum battle here, and the set piece in general obviously is going to be massive. This is a game that's going to be won by forwards, I think it's comfortable to say. But the scrum battle is super intriguing here.
It is.
From an Ireland point of view, you know, I would be extremely worried about the scrum. On the evidence of what I've seen, just game on game, like there's just a couple of nuggets without Tadhg Furlong. Like Andrew, like it's not a picture that we're used to seeing really since the days of like Tom Court.
Well, that was the day of Tom Court in 2011.
Yeah, more days than one, unfortunately for us. But that day in particular was obviously bad. But like we had since rugby resumed post COVID, we had Mako Vunipola pretty much single-handedly win a European quarter-final by demolishing Andrew Porter, demolishing him. Prior to that, Ireland had been beaten in the scrum by Scotland. And then Cian Healy is a guy, like I was given out from a Georgian point of view about Nariashvili, a guy who's been a phenomenal servant, still being in there when he's past his prime. There's a touch of that to Cian Healy. Cian Healy's one of my favourite players ever, and one of the main reasons is because he was one of the best scrummagers I've ever seen.
He's definitely the best scrummager Ireland has ever produced.
100%,
on a technical basis.
100%, easily, and that includes Tadhg Furlong. Furlong was just big.
And Mike Ross, who was a very technical scrummager too. No one has gone through the longevity of career that Cian has had at Loosehead.
Some of the names he's taken, in fact, like him destroying Carl Heyman from Leinster against Toulon, like he's had some phenomenal moments as an aggressive scrummager. And he was at his peak probably a couple of years prior to that great 2018 in terms of scrummaging, where he was absolutely massive. But what happened to him then is that weight ended up telling on his ankle. And then he couldn't support it. So what he did in 2018 was he trimmed right down and got to a more sustainable weight. And then he was still good that year in the scrum, but Ireland, despite their success, never really made it about their scrum. And then last year, you know, Cian started to fade a bit more. He still got good plays in the loose, but the days of him demolishing tight head opponents became fewer and fewer until they were completely gone. And now you see him like coming off the bench fresh against Georgia and instantly looking under extreme pressure. So if I'm Scotland, it appears that Rory Sullivan is back on the squad. We haven't got an injury update, but that's just from Scottish Twitter picking him out of the training sessions and seeing him in there. Listen, he's training with them. If he comes in, that's going to be massive. But even without him, like Xander Fagerson has been excellent. The Scottish scrum, Ollie Kebble's a super player. Simon Bergen as well. They have some really, really quality props, and they have huge heft in terms of their actual forward pack in the tight five that they're picking at the moment. Massive, colossal heft. And while they got a couple of decisions against them in France, I thought, first of all, some of them were harsh. But second of all, I think this Irish scrum does not compare. We're not used to saying this about Irish scrums, but it's one of the worst in Europe. It's one of the most vulnerable. And I think that Scotland could break the back of this game if they dominate this battle.
If they do, for sure. I suspect they won't. I think it's going to be parity. I think I just have I've seen them edge it once with Sutherland this year, but even then it was close to parity. It wasn't complete domination. I think again it's an anomalous one that Scotland just don't perform as well against Ireland, and they don't perform particularly well away from home either. And I would not be surprised to see anomalous penalties go either way, and to kind of take place in other parts. I think the more furious contest, or the more interesting one in terms of dynamics, will be at maul as well, because both of them are so kind of dirty and ridiculous at their maul defence too, between Henderson and whatever locks are in for Scotland, Gray as well, just getting their hands in and making it a mess. But it's scrum. I actually think the point of focus will be, I think Scotland will be scrumming aggressively, but I don't think it'll pay dividends. I suspect a lockdown scrum is what we'll be seeing.
Hopefully, but well, certainly on paper, I think Scotland have a much better scrum, and I think Ireland are extremely vulnerable, and I think it could be the difference maker. I think it could be. If Scotland are to win this game and break their Ireland duck, which I feel like is coming, and now might be the most vulnerable time for Ireland for them to do it. I think that'll be the basis of it. But to pivot on in a broader sense and look at Scotland and their approach to the game, From a squad point of view, as we were saying, Sutherland might be back in.
That'd be good.
I'm curious to see whether they make any changes. We were referring at lock
to Gray, and we've seen Skinner. And
we've seen Scott Cummings has been starting for them with Sam Skinner coming off the bench pretty consistently. And while they're excellent players, one of the things that we've championed about Scotland is the depth that they have.
Yeah.
And so it's very surprising to see Toulis and Gilchrist, who are the stalwarts and excellent in it,
seem to have fallen right out of favour,
but not even rotated in.
Yeah, they should be rotated in, given that they're playing a very full, especially with Finn out and now Hastings out. They've kind of accepted their lot to be a bit more of a rudimentary nuts and bolts kind of 10-man rugby team a lot of the time, and that demands by necessity a hell of a lot of work from your lock forwards. It really does. And to have guys of the quality of Gilchrist and Toulis to not even be rotated in to share that load. Seems a bit silly, because I don't think the gulf in quality is that vast, if even at all.
No, I don't think Scott Cummings has been that good. I think it would be... you'll obviously know the squad, as we say, by the time this video comes out. We don't have it. But I think if Scott Cummings is in there with Johnny Gray, I think Johnny Gray has to be in there. I think he's very good.
He's a very good tackler for them. He makes all their tackles.
He's super physical. He's in good form. But if Scott Cummings is in there with Skinner on the bench again, that'll be just like a not great sign. Not a telling one, but a not great sign. They should rotate that. They have huge depth. But by and large, outside of that, the squad is pretty settled.
Yes.
We know that Duncan Weir and Ali Price will be steering the ship. They've had a tetchy time of it on offence. But first and foremost, as we said with Ireland, I think this is a game for the forwards. This is a proper old school Celtic brawl.
Will they arrive at the pitch as well? Because there's been a risk. There's just certainly been historical precedent for Scotland to kind of go into shell mode sometimes when they're away from home. That's been a thing that they've been griping about their own performances
in the Townsend area.
Is just the difference between a Murrayfield showing versus an Aviva Stadium or an anywhere else.
They did get their win against Wales and Cardiff.
They did.
I actually think they've actively improved in that area.
They have. It's been a focus for them. But then just more so than away from home or whatever. Same thing as we said about Ireland. You need to arrive in the first quarter with the energy that you want to lay down for the whole game. If they get shocked by a physical or a passionate Irish showing in the first quarter, that's pretty inexcusable. But it would be probably insurmountable, because it'll be a tight enough affair.
They're dealing with an Ireland team that are super dangerous from their point of view, in terms of if Ireland get on top of you, it's hard to get back into the game. But they're also dealing with a team that's vulnerable, that's under a bit of pressure.
Exactly.
They're going to be playing in Dublin, but with no crowd to get them geared up. And if Scotland can make a mess of it and can get on top, it could be danger city for Ireland. And that's where rattling Ireland is obviously invaluable, because it's a team without great coaching and without great direction,
and with a brittle confidence, if any.
So and then Sexton starts forcing every play if they fall behind, because it's not going to plan. And that's where you can get meltdowns from Ireland, and I definitely think there's scope for that. But what it involves, as you say, is that first quarter, and they need their big guys, their Jamie Ritchies, their Hamish Watsons, their Johnny Grays, to get on top of Ireland with the ball in hand and without, smashing through their respective opponents and really starting to own those contact areas. Shrugging off Irish tacklers. We know they have the quality to do it. Hamish Watson in particular, really, really dynamic runner at his best, and if he can put in that talismanic display that we know he has in him, that really is one of the paths in terms of contact winning to getting on top of the game.
Yes, indeed. And then with ball in hand as well, just one point of focus on a technical point is they know that the line speed that will be dictated by usually the 7 of Ireland they've experienced before.
Either Josh or CJ, depending on what decisions they make in terms
and
of
that'll change the pace of the line. Like if it's Josh, it'll be quicker than if it's CJ. But they do know that pressure will be coming there. Surely Weir is expecting it. He hasn't tended to respond that well to that kind of pressure in this Autumn Nations thus far. The attack has stuttered off the back of that fairly simple pressure to 10 approach. Can they work something clever in to try and have runners off him to try and isolate that runner and find space around the corners, because they have good ball runners.
It's something that Leinster and Ireland have deployed pretty religiously recently, is having that 7 make a shoot really just on the inside shoulder of the 10 around that forward carry, whether it's Will Connors or Josh. And it has been very effective at shutting down sort of rudimentary Northern Hemisphere offense.
But
there are ways around it. There are a couple, as you say. It should be something that they have the blueprint for, that they're ready for.
Well, it certainly shouldn't be something they're surprised by.
Just there's a couple of ways you can attack it. You can literally take the tackle, but make the ball quick. That's a key one. Like if you're there as a pod and he's right in front of you, tackle ball quickly, and then there's no one there the next time. And Ireland, being slow, tend to be quite slow to get around the corner. So there's no you can take the momentum sappingness away from being stopped behind the gain line if you're almost ready for it and slip the ball back and then instantly move around the corner.
Somehow you can doubt that'll be the approach looking at Scotland this year.
I've seen that kind of stuff work, and like the point is that they just have to make the adjustment.
The other side of it is like to Van der Merwe, who they've found it hard to get his hands on the ball in space because they haven't really executed their passing game as well as they might do in terms of just the traditional way of getting wide, but he has been hungry for work, and he's a guy who's actually, I wouldn't fear for him. Like, you wouldn't put a little Darcy Graham down that channel, he'd probably get smushed, but Van der Merwe's a big strong man, and he will check that line if he can run off Weir, and they need to support Weir a little more and bail him out of some of that pressure that he will be under. Give him easy options to execute so that they can then get
100%. So he's like your backup quarterback. You know, you gotta mind him. You're not getting him throwing bombs down the field. No. It's not the way he plays.
Indeed.
But from a Scotland point of view, I've seen like some footage in training as well, which would suggest that like they still think of themselves as a passing team, especially the backs.
Yes,
like the forward pack are winning games, but the backs.
Well, they've landed on their best centre partnership as far as that Johnson Harris, lovely balance to that. They just need to. And they have been running off each other, those two guys as well. And Stewie Hogg can be a link man as well. He can. It will involve a bit of Hogg at first receiver again,
or like even second receiver.
Well, like I think on occasion, like Weir will have to take a contact, and Hogg needs to be straight in there to bail him out.
What I would like to see them do once they get on top of a couple of tactics is really do probe the 13 channel, be it Chris Farrell or someone else. We have seen England shock Ireland by moving the ball wide quickly. It's probably something they're not quite expecting, and just with a little bit of a screen ball, they don't obviously have Finn Russell, but still trying to work it onto the outside shoulder of the 13. Ireland can get narrow sometimes.
Yes, they do. Always,
pretty consistently, in fact. And especially when you consider the fact that there's been so little wide offense in the tournament so far,
and there has been space out
the default of the Irish defence is going to be to sort of sit in and get ready for the big tackle. And Scotland, I would love to see them like. Jamie Ritchie is a guy who works really well in those wide channels. I'd love to see them deploy him out there in support of a couple of wingers.
Even Hamish can be tenacious and pacey out in that wide channel.
Absolutely. But just trying to work at getting outside the 13 channel, and that's when Ireland's scrambled E really comes under pressure. And we've seen like the likes of Stockdale, etc., make huge errors in terms of scrambled E.
Their back three is a completely untested,
we don't even know who they're going to select.
We don't even know who they're going to select, but it's certainly what you used to associate with Ireland when you had a Rob Kearney in the backfield was just a real solidity that is kind of a decade in the making. Now you have something brand new out of the box that's not quite working with confidence and stuff, so you want to try and attack them there.
But that's the adjustment Scotland have to make as well, as like they're very used to trying to punch holes in the midfield of teams using the Johnson-Harris dynamic. Ireland are pretty very solid in the midfield.
They love
defense,
that game,
but a bit narrow. You got to get outside them.
Definitely a big area. And then, as we said, with Ireland's point of view, Captain Hoggy, very decent in attack. Can he dial in on the pendulum? Because Ireland will kick the ball. They will need to be alive to it. He'll need to just be assured and confident and put in a captain's showing. Kind of, if he can claim a few high balls in the first half, that'll give oodles of confidence to the way they want to play the game then, because just the difference, you see all these former players talk about it. Brian O'Driscoll's a big one when he was singing Rob Kearney's praises. Is just the difference it makes having a guy in fullback who's going to clean up those balls, make no issue about it, especially if he's your captain. Just to have him be assured and be confident and make a statement or two early on, that'll suddenly give the likes of Weir or the likes of Price that more confidence to go wide or to flash wide, because they kind of in the back of their mind they're thinking, even if this goes wrong, Hogg might bail me out, so that it gives you a bit more confidence.
100%, and shutting down that kicking game will be massive. And likewise on defence, I mean, we can't overstate enough, this is a Celtic brawl. This is going to be a physical fight, and the winning of the fight is going to be the winning of the game in large parts.
So and as we said, scrums, look at rucks, look at tackles, just look at collisions. Collisions will be telling.
It often is the case, but no more so than when you have sides that aren't going to be moving that quickly. Scotland, even to get their out wide picture, are gonna need to own that forward battle. So that's going to be massive for them, and that's the winning of the game for them. They have to show up with the right body language, with the right attitude, with the right focus and self belief, which I think they're developing to turn over an Ireland team at home that while sluggish can still perform to a level that is going to be tough for Scotland to face. So in terms of predictions, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have many of them. Like as always with looking at Ireland, I have the green lens on, and then it turns into red very quickly. It's very, very tough to say. I actually suspect we will edge it in an unimpressive showing and limp on. And
sort of like the game in February where they won by 7 points.
Yeah, something scrappy without much on show from us, and maybe Scotland even having the better of the chance, or the few little bits of continuity and decent rugby are actually on the Scottish side, but we just edge it by winning collisions.
You just don't back that Scottish clutch to get it done again.
Yeah, I kind of think a combination of Scotland bottling it and us being physical but rudimentary will see us limp on. And I actually kind of I don't know, the Ireland fan in me is kind of torn, thinking like, is it better for us to get an absolute pumping at home at the hands of Scotland and then just get Farrell out?
No, they're not going to get Farrell out.
I know.
They could lose by 60. Farrell is in till the end of his contract.
I know. Of course, it's better to win games than lose
always
them.
100%.
I suspect a scrappy win for Ireland, just to be honest, where my head's at.
I guess that's probably what the bookies suspect as well. I mean, I don't know, it's tough for me to say, obviously, I was going to say it could go one of 3 ways. Of course it could. It could go one of many ways. This is why these prediction things that we do at the end of our previews are very much just for colour more than anything. But I mean, like, what you're talking about is a battle where neither pack edges it, and slowly one team makes more plays than the other. Just the way I've been thinking about the game, and there's no reason why it couldn't play out the way you do, I kind of feel like one of the 2 sides is going to get on top. I feel like Ireland are either going to come out with a performance that, as Ireland fans, we remember from times gone by, usually in November, actually, after, and it happened under Declan Kidney, it happened under Eddie O'Sullivan, happened under Joe Schmidt in that post-World Cup period where we were pretty sluggish, where we'd have like a bad Six Nations and start off autumn really poorly, and then all of a sudden there'd be one game where they show up and they play and they are at the pitch, and all of a sudden the difference in energy levels is like night and day, and then they are stopping teams behind the gain line, and they are winning contacts going forward, and it all looks so much better. And they end up running away with it and winning the battle. So I think either we see that from Ireland, or we see Scotland really step up to the plate and
just kind of dominate and
back up
team.
Yeah, back up their good season by beating a team who they should beat, they certainly should have a better record against, and should back themselves. I think they have been mighty impressive this year in so many ways. The backup 10 situation is obviously rough for their offense. Finn Russell is just he's a missing element for them. He's caused Ireland problems every time they've met.
Yes, he causes everyone problems.
Yeah, I remember Joey Carberry in 2019 really he made a mug of him. He was like, "Oh, I'm elite. This is what elite is." And Carberry picked off Carberry pass, and Finn Russell's an exceptional player, and without him, they are going to be vulnerable. But I just think that, it could go anyway. It could go Ireland's way, but I just think honestly that Scotland are due, and that what I tend to do is try, when I'm in a position of doubt, err on the side of which team do I honestly think is a better rugby team right now, and I think Scotland are a better rugby team right now, and so devoiding the history factors and the voodoo and the jargon and all that, I'm just going to say I think the better rugby team is going to edge the contest because they're better. I think they're going to own the scrum. I think there's a day of reckoning coming for this Irish scrum, whether it's this one or it happens in the future, but I'm going to say I think it might be this weekend, and I think they might get beaten up front and then not respond well because they haven't got a game plan and lose the game. Now I hope that doesn't happen, but that's what I'll say.
It's possible. I can see that all right for sure. All right, with that we will park our Ireland head,
not mention them again.
Nope.
Thank you for watching the Overlap Rugby podcast. If you enjoyed that video, please be sure to like and share with your friends. And if you'd like to hear more of what we have to say, please be sure to subscribe and click that bell so you get notified when we upload our videos. And please join the comment section as well. We like to get a fun conversation going here.